welcome everybody. I just want to quickly introduce our panel. We've got Mark Godfrey here, sitting next to Almine, and Jeffrey Sturges, who represents the Wesselmann estate, and our moderator, Louisa Buck. Just thought it would be exciting to have this panel discussion on the occasion of Tom Wesselmann's 6th show of the gallery, and it's the first time that all these bedroom paintings have been shown all together. And I guess, without further ado, I'll let the panel take over.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, it certainly gets the prize for the best backdrop I've ever had for any gallery talk I've ever given. And it really is thrilling to see these works together. Together, I gather, for the first time, the bedroom paintings, but the bedroom paintings particularly featuring the penis and, of course, the seascape paintings as well. So I want to ask Almine, first of all, as the gallerist, as our host for today, and this is one of latest in several exhibitions of the Wesselmann estate with whom you work, but why particularly did you decide, and your gallery decide, this was the time to show these works together, these extraordinary works that really have only been seen separately or in sort of groups intermingled with other exhibitions? Why put them all together now, Almine?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, after 5 shows, we have been thinking of specific aspects of the artist, and especially body parts haven't been much shown because probably some museums or institutions have been debating about what would be the press or public reactions to that, because obviously Wesselmann is the only 21st century, I mean the second part of 21st century, and who did this type of paintings. It's unique. And I always thought they are very interesting and important to show. And why this moment? Probably because we did 5 shows with more global vision of his work, and it was the time. Also, the period is a bit Puritanist period that we are living in, and I thought it's important to show what was done in the 70s, even maybe 60s, and to show what it meant and why he did that. We don't know exactly because we are not in the artist's head, but it's interesting to see that some women artists like Betty Tompkins have also painted penises, and it would be interesting to speak about the difference between the vision of such an artist and Wesselmann.
We aren't in Tom Wesselmann's head, but we have the next best thing, which is Jeffrey here.
Thank you.
Welcome, current director of exhibitions for the Estate of Tom Wesselmann, and indeed a studio assistant to Tom in the late 80s for several years, yes.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
so I think it's very interesting to talk to you now just about the context. These extraordinary works, they're made from 1967 to 69.
Right.
So, early, but not that early in his career, but in the middle of the sexual revolutions kicking off, feminism's kicking off, there's optimism in the air. You can sort of feel it around the walls.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, where they fit in within Tom's work and also within his life as well, just to kind of give us the context for these extraordinary paintings.
It's interesting, that you brought up this idea of censorship today. We were thinking about, can we display these images on Instagram? Will they be pulled down? And it's something that was an issue also for Tom to think about during this period of the 1960s. As he mentioned, the paintings that we're looking at on the wall were in an exhibition in 1970. So he's been an artist, and a well-known artist, an established artist in the pop sort of definition for that decade. But I think it's important also to remember a few things that were going on in the beginning of that decade that sort of lead up to this.
No, please
I mean,
do.
1960, you have the legalization of the contraceptive pill. It's a sort of new, very important sort of social change that's happening at that point.
Yeah.
And then also in 1961 is the sort of first publication of Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer, which sort of brings on all of these cases, this discussion about censorship and what is pornographic. So that's being discussed at this time. Betty Friedan publishes her book, The Feminine Mystique, in 1963. We have this issue being in the beginning of the second wave feminism at this point is being discussed, and then already in 1964 the Civil Rights Act is signed. So all of these major sort of social ideas are being discussed, and people are sort of changing their opinions and becoming more and more accepting of difference, of other ways of living, other ways of being. So I think that's a really important sort of ground point to think about the beginning of his career.
Time of kind of social ferment, really. I mean, just
Exactly.
everything kicking off all around.
So many things changing, so many things in flux. Exactly.
And his own life as well. Can we just zero in a bit? I mean,
Yeah,
he always says that, you know, the bedroom, the Great American Nude was originally Claire Selly, his
Yes.
partner, went on to be his wife. He married, I think, in 1963. They were
Yes.
at Cooper Union together. But of course, you know, it's every woman as well. But I just, you know, he was 10 years into his career, as it were, but still, you know, at the relative beginning as well. So there's this sort of sense of youth and optimism and loving the sex.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's also important to remember that there is a personal aspect to this. I mean, even the painting that is here on this side of the gallery, the black and white portrait is a picture of Claire, his wife. But the career begins with the most famous series that he completed, The Great American Nude. Those paintings begin with an exhibition in 1961. And this is a series, although it's called The Great American Nude, that really is inspired by the new relationship that he's in with Claire. And it's the excitement of this relationship, this sort of newfound life that he's leading, and also becoming an artist. All of this gets invested into this series. And as the series develops, towards the end of the decade, he starts additional series, and some of those are the bedroom paintings that we see in the exhibition and also the seascape paintings. And what's special about these is the focus on aspects of the body, not the whole body. So it gave him the opportunity to combine two series that he was working on, both the Great American Nude and then also the still life series that he was working on. And you can sort of see this sort of integration of the body with the still life.
And they become images, and we're going to talk a lot more about that cropping, the collaging, the formalism, the images. But I want to just broaden it out again by bringing Mark in at this point. I mean, Mark, in your illustrious career as a curator from Tate and beyond, you've been charting for a long time the cultural landscape. And it is interesting that in the past few years, the figurative has very much kind of, I mean, it never went away, of course, but it's returned into the kind of art sphere. And the whole kind of sense also of depicting bodies, body parts, particularly the black body, inserting into art history. You know, your great show, Soul of a Nation, featured many of the great artists working with figurative art. Echo Eshen's Time Is Always Now, black artists reflecting the black figure. It's been touring in America. So bodies, figures, but nonetheless, the penis is still quite a rare thing, isn't it? I mean, it crops up, as it were, but not as often as one might think.
It is very rare, and the invitation to contribute to this panel made me have to sort of do a filter of all the art I've worked with and the artists I've worked with and penises. And actually, you kind of get some surprising results. I mean, you mentioned the Soul of a Nation show. So we exhibited an important painting by Barclay Hendricks in that show, which was the front cover of the catalogue. And that painting, which is called Homage to My Man Superman, where he's in a Superman top, has the very kind of top of his penis, top, like that part, rather than the helmet.
End.
But it was interesting when it was a great cover, but when the show traveled to the States, the cover of the catalogue had to be changed for a different catalogue cover where there was a group of clothed men plus a woman with her breast out. So
that was
like
okay.
Yeah, a naked breast was fine, but a little bit of a penis was not fine. But Barclay Hendricks actually did paint his own penis several times and made a joke painting called Brilliantly Endowed in 1977. He's normal-sized guy, but I think he was confronting certain sort of stereotypes and myths about black bodies. So there's that, but other artists at the time, played with this subject matter. Gerhard Richter did a series of paintings based on porn images that have some relation to the Betty Tompkins, but Betty Tompkins's choice of images were just much more hardcore. Richter's paintings are of nude porn women models, but not of penises and so on. And so the Tompkins is kind of quite, much more explicit or much more hardcore. I was also thinking about, it's very rare that you've got a white heterosexual guy painting penises. The painting of penises by heterosexual women kicks off, I think, in the 70s, although there'll probably be people who can correct me, but in the 60s, let's say in Evelyn Axel's work, instead of having a penis, you've got a stand-in, like an ice cream, like, in this painting here.
Yeah, the gear stick gets used a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, look at, licking an ice cream, or there's a painting of a gear stick. But by the early 70s, you do get, for instance, Joan Semmel's painting, Intimacy, Autonomy, this beautiful painting. But the penis is always flaccid, and it's sort of post-coital usually, rather than right in the middle of the act. So Wesselmann's, we've got sort of semi-flaccid or sort of engorged, but never a full-on erection. But, you do have women, I think, Semmel particularly, using that subject matter.
And then later, of course, Judith Bernstein with her pneumatic cocks that go. I think we have to say cocks. I'm sorry, everybody. I can't keep saying penises. Are we all right? Are we all right with this?
But I will just finally pass around a polka, an amazing polka drawing for Sigmar Polka, mid-70s, does a show in a Kunstverein in the middle of Germany and makes a series of porn paintings featuring palms, which everyone who was a member of the Kunstverein got to buy one. And I've printed it out so you can pass it around, but you'll see the penis sort of proliferates in the palm trees. So there are some rare avant-garde examples, but I still think that the original, or the kind of boldness of Wesselmann's work to confront this subject is super interesting, and I have loads of questions to ask.
I just wanted to add something about...
Please, add
away.
away.
So like the source. So like, for example, the Betty Tompkins, those are based on photographs, I believe.
Right.
And I think the John Semmel paintings, she actually attended sessions where people were having sex. And that was the source of a lot of these images. They were like these sort of sex parties and also swingers, and she was making paintings based on that. So it's interesting to know what the actual source is. And then in the case of Tom's paintings, it is his penis. He says it is his penis. And as you go around and you see the paintings, they're very similar, except for the one behind us.
So whose was the one behind us?
Well, if you look at the shape, it's pretty much the same. It's just the color that's changed.
You said
So
it's
I
him in
think
disguise,
it's
didn't
him
you?
in
Which I quite-
disguise, yes.
And I want to actually just as it were, zero. Everything one says is going to have a double meaning as well in this conversation, but I'm going to stop sniggering every time I say something. But I do want to zero in a bit on this, in that, I love this piece of writing that I didn't know about. All you Wesselmann scholars, of course, know it really well, the great Slim Stealingworth piece of writing where it's Wesselmann writing about himself, in the third person. And I love it that, he says, Tom Wesselmann introduced the penis in 1967, and, he found it was an electrifying subject, and he very much makes the point saying, he's no longer the viewer but the subject. He says that himself about himself. So he's already making really interesting power dynamics. And he also makes the point that feminists have made, and people will make now observing, that it's horizontal. It's like he actually says it replaces the reclining nude about his own work. So I'm so fascinated by that, Jeffrey. Could you talk a little bit more about the motivation for putting his own member in his bedroom scenes and objectifying it in that way, but also in that very particular way as well, in a, dare I say, a very female cliched way with the horizontal.
Absolutely. I think he was always open to possibilities, and this, even within the series where it's body parts, whether it's the hand or the foot or or the breast, I think then it came to him, why couldn't it be? I think he was really trying to open these up. And I think by doing this, he raises a really interesting point, because he's placed himself in the placement of the subject. He is the observed. He's not observing. And I find that really fascinating, and I think it would be something that would be also, it sort of really rethinks that power dynamic as well, I think.
In the paintings of Wesselmann about penises as a landscape, if you compare with Tompkins, it's quite romantic, it's optimistic, it's joyful. A Betty Tompkins painting about penis is quite aggressive. It's a machist vision of a kind of a tool. It's totally another vision.
Absolutely.
And I think this is important because Wesselmann was on the woman's side. He loved women, he loved the liberation, free love. It's at the time of the peace and love, so we gotta remember this hippie time. And so the feeling is totally in opposition with a kind of very strong or aggressive kind of feminism.
I mean, I was wondering whether you've got any sense of why he turned to painting penises and his own penis at this particular point. Was it a sense that, you know, the culture had changed by the late 60s from the early 60s, and that this was a time of, you know, peace and love, and that nudity at Woodstock and so on? Or was it in any sense that he was worried about the reception of his work by people more attracted to first-wave feminism?
Who would say he was objectifying women.
Yeah, he felt that he could be critiqued for objectifying women, and that it was time to look at himself. I mean, I've read lots of things. Yeah.
It sounds strategic, and I don't think it was strategic. I don't think he was guided in his aesthetic by this will play well with the audience. I think it was his own sort of genuine sort of self-examination. I mean, he did study psychology at university, and during a very sort of tumultuous period when he is divorcing his first wife, he goes into psychotherapy. And so I think this would have been an opportunity to think very differently about the work that he was making. And it's also interesting the point you made, Almine, about the aesthetic, that the black and white painting was very aggressive, and you felt that the colorful painting was much more sort of joyful. And I would have to agree with that, because I think aesthetically it brings something to the situation. There is the penis, and there is this sort of almost surprising or even aggressiveness towards the viewer and being confronted by this image. But at the same time, he's giving you a very beautiful image to contemplate as you're dealing with this confrontation. So I think you get both. Yeah.
He's more into something romantic, like with the man and woman.
Yes.
It's not about, the fight of feminism and machismo or whatever.
And the other thing is that there is no sex depicted, right? There's the penis. The Betty Tompkins is a sex act being depicted. So this idea of aggression or insertion, or you really do get that kind of feeling. But here the body's been removed, and we're just contemplating this one aspect of the body, one particular part that we're focusing on.
I also think it's very interesting the way we're not witnessing a sex act, but we're witnessing what he calls, again, I'm cribbing the man himself in his writings, talking about a compressed composition, and the scale. So no, you're not witnessing a sex act, but you're very up close to these images. And the fact that he chose the subject matter for these still lives, the bedroom scenes, things that you would find in a bedroom, a clock, a cigarette, an ashtray, flowers in a vase, a photo. So you've got that sort of appropriate, as it were, imagery for a bedroom. You're in that bedroom. Also, with the angle of the penis, people have said about, a fellatio angle. I mean, no, you're not looking at it attached to the rest of the body, but there are all these suggestions. But then again, it's flipped on its side again by the fact that they're so stylized, they're so flattened. You don't see the brushstrokes. They're paintings of images, I think, one commentator said. So
Absolutely.
There's this constant kind of intimacy and then drawing back again. And it seems like he's constantly playing this kind of push me, pull you, as it were, with that sense of up close, intimate, and then actually detached attached, and even the word clinical's been used about the way in which they've been depicted.
It's true, but it's an imaginary world he's depicting, right? It's not necessarily the real world, it's a version of the world. And I think he's reminding us through the palette and the form that this is a way of thinking. He's thinking through these pictures.
Can I ask something? In preparation, I read a couple of the interviews in the catalogue for the recent show in Paris from his models. And there's an amazing account of what it's like to be drawn by him, how close up he was, the way he drew, and that sort of intense study of another body. And how did he prepare these works? I mean, are there studies for them?
There are
any sense of
studies.
how?
Every painting sort of begins with a very loose study. I mean, we have an example in the other gallery over there where you see different variations of the penis in the seascape. And he would have developed that idea. Once he sort of honed in on the outline and the placement of the objects, then he would have developed a much more sort of precise, small oil study, which is on that left wall up there. And then that would, in that stage, he would really resolve all of the aesthetic questions that he had. And then it was a matter of scaling up. And he would use an opaque projector to sort of scale up the image to find the precise size that he wanted. So it was very methodical. And there is the beginning where there's like a confrontation with a real person. And then through the process, it develops into something else. It develops into something more imaginary, because even if he's making a study of a breast, and we have some of the drawings where it's the isolated study of a body part, the whole scene is not there. Now that scene is imagined and brought into that real experience and added to it.
But you think these would have begun by looking at himself in the mirror and actually drawing himself naked?
He used photography sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes it was studies directly from the model. It was a mixture of those two techniques.
I think it's interesting too, there's a very classic text on him, the Brenda Shammerman text about operating in the gap between art and life, just to quib the Rauschenberg phrase, but using body parts, using the imagery that he used, and the way in which he played with and off the object and the image to sort of keep that, in a way, that spark of life going. So it seems to me the body parts very much were brought in, so it wasn't still life, it was actually moving life. And this amazing piece he did called Tit Box, where there actually was a real breast suspended into a box filled with images of still life objects.
We showed that in Paris.
I mean, could we just talk a little
piece.
bit? Yeah, could you just talk a little bit about the way in which it seems these body parts are there to put this liveliness, this electricity back into the still life and make it active?
There is a woman, a real woman, and we install a kind of bed on top, and there is a hole, and her breast is
Suspended.
suspended.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was very interesting. We had actresses doing it.
But you only see the breast, that's the point, isn't it? It's framed by the box and
Only the breast.
like a
It's
compartment.
body part.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's the real one. And it was an incredible piece, beautiful.
It's very fascinating. We were talking about this sort of surrealist aspect of this, but this sort of diorama scene where you see a typical Wesselmann still life of an orange and a flower and an ashtray, but then because it's a diorama, it's inserted into the wall. He could hide the model behind the wall and then insert her breast into the diorama. So the scene for the viewer is very surreal, because you immediately recognize the idea of the real versus the artificial. The way the objects are painted and presented is very artificial, and to see the real flesh again, it's actually very sort of shocking, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
quite incredible. People
Yeah.
were fascinated.
Yes.
We had so many visitors.
And that was first shown in the same exhibition that included the penis paintings that are in this show, and then the next time it was shown, more recently, was with Almine in Paris.
But the first, we showed only one landscape with a penis in that show, and it was so funny because one of the collectors, I did a little tour because she wanted I do a tour with her, and she was looking and she did not get it.
She didn't see it was a
She didn't
penis.
realize.
She said, I mean, it's a landscape? And I said, yes, it's a landscape. And so I wanted to let her look more and maybe realize what she was looking at. But it was very difficult. She could not, have the concept. So then after a while, I had to say what it was.
I don't know whether this is helpful, but it's still unimaginable that he would have made a partner piece to, is it called tit box? He wouldn't have made a dick box. You know, there's no partner piece that one could think that an artist like him could have done, where a male actor has his, you know, cock hanging through a hole, and that's part of a composition. So it's interesting that he went that place or that direction.
Well, back to art history, I guess, in a way. I mean, back to the territory of art history, where you can isolate breasts in the same way. But it is interesting that that was the same time as he put the body parts into these. I mean, did he talk to you at all about these penis paintings? Did he ever talk to you about the motivation?
He didn't talk to me about them, but I think what's also another interesting point about the paintings, these penis paintings, was the reaction in the press. Right. And then there's a very well-known article in the New York Times that was written by Peter Sheldon. He's describing the whole show, which includes many of the bedroom paintings, the breast paintings, but then also the penis paintings. And his response to the penis paintings was that they were jokey. He obviously didn't take them seriously. He thought they were a joke. And
joke about what?
He didn't say about what. He just felt that's how he characterized them. They were just funny. Like Tom was making a joke. And Tom's response to it was that, well, why is that funny and why not a breast? Like, what is it? I mean, right there he sort of identified something that we've been sort of skirting around already in this discussion about what's okay, what's not okay.
But can I suggest, what year was this show?
1970.
So, I mean, it's just a couple of other, like, the penis and the flaccid penis being part of a joke around that time is kind of interesting. Klaus Oldenburg did the sculpture in Yale, which was a sort of erecting lipstick, which kind of then deflated. And as far as I remember, it was sort of obviously using phallic tumescence and detumescence, thinking about the Vietnam War at the time and the whole idea of male power and deflating that. So other artists in Wesselmann's circle were using the idea of the non-erect penis to laugh at American power. And so, I mean, I just think that if it was seen as a joke, there are interesting ways of understanding why it could be a joke. And the other thing, if you don't mind, another thing that I thought about when thinking about these paintings is a quote from Amy Silman about abstract expressionist painting. So I just want to sort of take a little. So she's writing about the myths about abstract expressionist painting, and this is in an essay in Art Forum. And she says, its detractors would have it that the whole kit and caboodle is nothing but bad politics, steel-welded around a chassis of machismo, that the paint stroke, the very use of the arm, is equivalent to a phallic spurt, to Jackson Pollock whipping out his dick and pissing in Peggy Guggenheim's fireplace. And what she wants to sort of make it the point that at a certain point, Abex was seen in relation to, phallic power. And
Picasso classically said, I paint with my penis, or somebody did, Renoir, I don't know, one of them did, maybe all of them. But it's a quote that's bandied.
Some of the pop artists are trying to combat abstract expressionism by replacing that power gesture with something else. And, obviously Roy Lichtenstein does that by inflating the brushstroke with all the mediations that you get in his paintings like Little Big Painting. But I think that's another context for thinking about these penis paintings. It may not be his direct motivation, but if phallic power was connected with, de Kooning and Franz Klein, then to make penis paintings like this is another, maybe that's part of the joke as well. It's a joke at Abex.
Yeah, I don't know about it necessarily being a joke against Abex. I mean, I think that he talks about this, that Abex was something that he emulated. It was a type of painting that he admired greatly, but understood that it was not a path for him. He could not go down that road. And so his solution was to do the opposite. And so the representational paintings that he makes afterwards, everyone he's trying to carry forward that idea of machismo that's a part of that kind of aggressive power. He wants that in his images, and he's looking for subject matter that would maybe depict that. Absolutely.
I think that's so interesting because wasn't de Kooning his great? Well, we had many heroes. Matisse, another one, but de Kooning was his great hero, was he not?
Absolutely.
And de Kooning's amazing women, those great big powerful goddesses, but all done with that incredible gestural brushstroke. And as you say, he went to the other side. These flatly rendered, billboard slick, glossy magazine slick images. But I mean, I don't want to say they're a joke, because they're absolutely not. They're really serious, formal, considered art historical paintings. But also, there is humor there. I'm sorry, I can't help but think that, he's this inversion of the phallic being the horizontal, the nipple being erect, the cigarette, the playing with the most transitory and permanence. And I mean, I feel this is very much part of his thinking. Am I right in saying
Oh,
this?
absolutely. I mean, I think humor is something that's included in his aesthetic. It was something that was very important to him, and there is always a sort of subtext there. I mean, you could even say the same about the title, The Great American Nude, that it's partly serious, but it is also kind of a joke. I mean, he's sort of poking fun at this as an idea, how it's related to the Great American Dream or the Great American Novel.
And kind of deflating it and inflating it at the same time.
I think so. It's a kind of questioning.
Yeah.
I think he's really considering these ideas and trying to propose ways of thinking about them visually through pictures.
And the seriousness, too, it seems to me, just of the sheer formalism. I mean, the shaped canvases, the way that he uses the gallery wall as a stand-in for the breast round the corner, or indeed for a work that's not here, of a penis, where you've got somebody actually performing fellatio, and there's the outline and the blank wall. You fill in the penis yourself with your own mind. So he's constantly playing with reality, image, representation, and this seems to be a really serious philosophical investigation.
Well, yeah, and also I think
lightly.
with these shaped canvases, with these dropped out forms, he's really asking the viewer to participate. He's asking the viewer to imagine, and he's sort of giving us the responsibility to read the image, to fill in what's not there, and think about it. And even in terms of these paintings, he said, there's no sex depicted. He's suggesting it, but it's up to us to sort of finish the picture, to sort of fill in all of those details. And we become very active, I think, viewers.
Can we ask a bit more? I think we probably skirted over a little bit what this painting... Okay, this is also his penis, but he's just painting it as a black penis. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
And we have a black breast as well in this series too. So I'm curious.
But in as much this is himself, it's also, 1969 or so, the moment... What year is this?
69.
So, at the very moment of black power, it's an extraordinary thing to do as a white artist. Today, it would probably get you cancelled. But what do we make of it? I just don't know what
I think
to
we have to
how
think about
it.
the way that he worked. I mean, this idea of, like I said about the Great American Nude, these are drawings. These original drawings are his wife, but then he makes a painting from that. So there's a distance from that original, the sort of original impetus for the image. And I think in this case, Amanda had said it's the same penis, but that just happened to be the model that he had. Yeah. And then it was about imagining, okay, what could this picture depict, and then making that change.
But he must have you talked about the context of the time, civil rights, all these seismic changes taking place. To put a big black penis in the center of a painting when you're a white man painting your own white penis is quite a gesture, nonetheless, isn't it? So, I mean...
And considering race in this way, I mean, there are several examples in the Great American Nude series where there are black models. And I think it was another way of being inclusive. Yeah, that's the way that I would read the intention.
And one of the nice things about having this up right now is that people can go and have a look at Mickaleen Thomas's show at the Hayward. Yeah. And I thought it was a really amazing decision of whoever edited the catalogue for the Louis Vuitton show to interview her about, her as a viewer of the great American nude paintings, and to have a sort of queer African-American woman and thinking about her desire in looking at his paintings. And it made me want to ask, in your discussion of his inclusivity, what he might have thought about a kind of a gay male viewer of his paintings.
Would he be okay with that?
Whether he would, these paintings are opened up.
Because again, some of these, you have no idea, if you don't know Wesselmann's context, you could view this through a queer prism.
Yeah. I think you could. The paintings are open-ended. So, we can read meanings into them once he's completed the painting. And I think that it's in line with his thinking and the way that the paintings are made. Even what I had said about the dropouts and the viewer sort of filling in the form, I think that's the same here with gender or with, sexual orientation.
I mean, he then stopped painting the penis paintings. I mean, he's carried on painting nudes, he carried on painting nude females. Yes. He stopped painting naked men's parts.
It's a very small series.
A very small series. Do we know why he stopped? Do we know, did he just feel it run its course, as it were?
I think it has run its course, exactly. I mean, he had sort of expanded the possibilities for what kinds of body parts, and he was moving on to new ideas. I mean, he was an artist who came up with new ideas and moved through them very quickly. He was very productive. So, I mean, the paintings that people know very well, the sort of early collage paintings, those are all completed within the first 5 years of the career. It's very fast, and he's sort of moving on to something else, and I think that's the case with this as well.
But the sense of collage remains, the sense of, in a way, cutting, pasting, inserting different art historical references further down the line, increasingly abstracted. I mean, the notion of abstract, I mean, he left abstraction, but he, in a way, almost did full circle at the end of his life, going back to more abstracted images again. So the choice of images, the choice of forms is still really interesting. Just to talk a bit about the sense of time, because these are locked in, these are built in, these images. They're flat, they're stylized. But you've also got the sense the erect penis doesn't last forever, the clock is ticking on, the cigarette is burning. Yes. There's a sense very much of time passing, not just the specific times in which they were made, but again a sort of sense of temporality, which I feel memento mori, I'm thinking almost here.
The rose and the roses are going to wilt. And all
exactly.
Flowers go, all that.
I know that looks like a plastic world, but at the same time, he's depicting these things that will change, that will die, that will fade.
And the whole sense of working with abstract images, working with the forms, with images of images, it seems to me. This is something that remained with him very much. He might have jettisoned the penis situation, the body parts that pull out to become bodies again, as it were. But it does seem to me still being very much about addressing images. Did you discuss that?
I think, yes.
The image, the reality.
I think so, and like we talked about process, there's a constant series of steps where he's repeating himself, right? He's honing in an image and repeating an image. And I think, yes, he's very well aware that these refer to other images as well. Even the Great American Nude and the title were sort of referring to that idea. So I think, yes, he is very aware of them being images. And then the inclusion of billboard images, of advertising images, as a way of sort of bringing in the real world, the familiar world, the world that we live in, and then inserting that into this imaginary space. So he's constantly thinking about that and very well aware of it.
And way beyond pop. I mean, he was ambivalent, was he not, about the whole pop label, as a lot of people are, about being vacuum packed into movements at certain points.
I think that was exactly the reason why. I mean, feeling sort of hamstrung and sort of stuck in one idea, or people thinking about him in one way. I mean, he did stay with these themes of the nude, the still life, and the landscape. And he was very upset when he would come up with a new way of presenting these ideas, and the response would be, here's another nude, here's another still life. But he was really trying to invent new ways of depicting these things.
I mean, nonetheless, Mark, you've done your penis SWOT, and we've gathered a few. But he was a rarity. I mean, him and Warhol were the only ones, pretty much, I think, within pop, certainly pop as I know it, and Warhol isolating and cropping, as it were, as well, but not that much. Still now, yes, we can pull out examples, but it still causes controversy. It still causes upset and anxiety and provocation, the depiction of the penis. And I think it would be interesting to sort of, before we wind up, just talk a bit about that, because
those David Hockney drawings. They're kind of I can't
around
remember
that time, I guess. Yeah,
they were sort of more, but they're more private and and
they're quite
I
tender.
remember in the Donna de Salvo's Whitney exhibition, she had this series of the Warhol sex parts portfolio, but it was just a portfolio with a limited edition of I think 30. So it was a sort of privately disseminated series.
So so there's still this sense very much of keeping it. I mean, I think of a recent example. I think it's been cited, Ilma Gore, you know, like the Make America Great Again, when you have Donald Trump with a tiny weeny penis that upset Donald Trump so much that he had to then mention it in Congress or somewhere, you know, to kind of at one of his many rallies. You know, this sort of strange mythologization, the concealment, the idea that a large member means that you're some sort of amazing hero, whereas if you're not so well endowed, you're not. Which of course is which was the great you know, joke being made in the painting that you were citing earlier on, Mark. You know, but I mean, I think it's still very vexed territory. Even I noticed, you know, the window displays don't show much to the street in this gallery. You know, it's interesting how we haven't moved on a huge amount since these paintings were first produced, it seems to me.
What happened in Paris with Louis Vuitton and these paintings? Were they big part of the show?
We did include one of the studies for the paintings, but I think there was a concern that it would sort of overwhelm the way the show was received to include, you know, some of these.
Which kind of validates what we're saying again,
Yes.
you know, that it would then dominate everything else, all the other more complex
very
points.
sensitive subject, you know. But, well, what we were saying about pop art, like depicting a kitchen, high and low, whatever you call it, you know better. When they opened the Whitney, the first show, the room for pop had 3 artists. Wesselmann, Warhol and Lichtenstein.
Yes.
And that's it. That was the pop room. So he's considered completely in the pop history, probably because of all what you said.
Yes.
Like the subjects that are in his show, the way he shows a nude or even maybe a penis, we have to see examples, is pop, because it is in a way that it speaks to everyone, because he inserts images that are not high considered.
I think that's an important point. It's a way of sort of celebrating everyday life, celebrating the life that we all live, not, you know, important philosophical ideas, but something that is very tangible and something we're all very familiar with.
And using body parts to do that, of course, is the most basic, because we've all
very
got
familiar.
them. You know?
What Mark said is very interesting, because in fact, there was really resistance of showing penises.
There's a painting in the Tate collection that I helped bring into the Tate collection, which is of a male nude model. It's a painting by Barclay Hendricks called Family Jewels. And, you know, you've got a black guy naked. And there was no problem showing that in the collection galleries whatsoever. No, for not 1 second was there any idea about not being able to show this painting. I even think there are sort of postcards and posters.
Why is that, do you think? Is it the pose?
Maybe it's the pose. It's quite a classical pose.
It's quite a classical. That's the point I'm making.
It's not, you know, you talk about scale. It's actually the scale of the body in relation to the whole painting. It's very different from these, where it's pretty.
And also self-portrait brilliantly endowed that the Barclay Hendricks, or indeed the Rashid Johnson response. They are standing there. It's evident what the subject of the work is, you know, and it ain't their face or their feet, you know. And I think this is also playing with scale. I think it's really interesting how some of these smaller studies are so tiny and so intense. I mean, I love this use of scale that he has. He doesn't seem to go the middle route ever, Wesselmann, with these things.
No, you're right. It's either very big or very small. I mean, I think the small paintings really draw you in, and you have that kind of an intimacy, and the large paintings just come at you.
But I think the pose and the scale, I mean, Mark, in your spectrum of looking, you know, around the world, curating museum collections, assembling collections, do you think it's the framing then that's the situation? I mean, I'm doing framing in the broadest sense that actually is where people get upset. You can get away with, you can Trojan horse in, as it were, more provocative content if you kind of dress it up in certain ways that aren't going to frighten the horses, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and the extent to which people get upset, you know, I don't know. I mean, like we know that maybe in Paris there was a desire. You know, it's a big show at Louis Vuitton. They want loads of people to come, and they don't want some social media protest about big penis paintings, and so they ask, for these paintings to be, for not so many of them to be seen, or maybe something to be taken out. But I guess there hasn't been a big retrospective in the States, and we haven't had a recent, we don't recently know whether these works could or couldn't be shown in a big American museum or
well, no one's going to try. That's what worries me.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you were a curator and you wanted to do a big Wesselmann show at a big museum in the States, you'd want to include these. Yeah. Because they're super interesting now. And I just don't know. I mean, right now, in this particular term, it's impossible to think about it. But in 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, or in 10 years' time, I would imagine they would be shown, and there would be lots of interesting responses. And as I said, I mean, like Michelin Thomas's responses to Wesselmann's work, I think really helps me think about his work, because I guess for, the stereotype is that the work is objectifying women.
What was her response?
Well, she just writes beautifully about, well, I can read it, 'cause it's really amazing.
Yeah, give us, because I think it is interesting, because not all of us have read the essay.
I mean, she just talks about the most substantial inspiration I draw from Wesselmann is his fearlessness in exploring themes of sexuality, desire, and the female gaze. For her to talk about him looking at the female gaze was totally surprising for me to read. So, if Michelin Thomas becomes the viewer of Wesselmann's work, it opens up lots of ways for curators to think about how to present his work, like in the current moment, which is really interesting.
She's been a big fan of the work for quite a long period, and did participate in the retrospective we did in 2012 in terms of writing a short text for that as well. And she's, been very friendly and very supportive of the work, and I think for the reasons that she's just mentioned, she can imagine herself in this position.
Yeah. But I think that's testament to the work. Yeah. That's testament to the fact that, a queer, younger, Black American female can find agency, inspiration, excitement from these works. And looking around the walls, I think they don't look historical. I mean, they are, because we know they are, but they
look very
don't.
Fresh,
they look very fresh, they look very contemporary, and can evidently attract the interest of different generations, different constituencies, which I think is actually a great note to end on. Thank you so much to my panel.
Thank you.
And thank you to Almine.